Hey everybody, we're going to talk a little bit more about the race cars and finish off the whole race car bit. There are a lot of questions that were asked from the previous video, and I'd like to answer some of them and then show you a little video, if I can, of an actual Formula One race. So let's start with that, okay? The arrows at Laguna Seca, the famous corkscrew turn. Now, if you listen, you can hear the downshifts before I come into view here. I'm leading the race. And then you can hear a little as tire slips as 500 horsepower tries to grip the track going down, again, the famous corkscrew. So let's see if this works. Sorry, this is really funky, but I don't know how to edit this stuff properly. And I'll tell you what, I'll post this as a separate video so the quality, shit, see, there it is. It already changed. Let's get back to this.
Hey, everybody.
Wait a minute. Shit. Here we go. Here we go.
Here we go.
Now that may repeat. It didn't. There it did. Okay, that's enough of that. Thanks to Steve Mueller, who happened to be at the track up there at that point and had his cell phone camera on. That was historic because I finally won a race with that Formula One beast. And it was interesting circumstances too, because the guy in the number 2 position was none other than Eddie Lawson. Now, you motorcycle aficionados will know that name because he won World Championship Moto GP, which is like Formula One for motorcycles. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. Great guy, a true champion. Obviously, I don't know, 15 years younger than me at least. And you see his piercing eyes. Wait a minute, champions look different. Total confidence. And I'm sure driving 4 wheels rather than 2, he's thinking, are these training wheels? I mean, I'm used to 2 wheels, and this thing's got 4 wheels. No, I'm just joking now. But I will say, after beating him, because that guy's not used to coming second, he's used to winning. So I wandered over just to say hey, and I overheard him yelling at his pit crew, "Hey, if that old geezer in that raggedy ass arrows beats me tomorrow, you guys are going to be looking for a new job." And I think they pulled an all-nighter and got a little bit more speed out of the car. And he did win the next day, the trophy race. That was the qualifying race that I won. And that's as it should be. He's a better driver, a better car, and I just the luck was with me that day. And you know, it was fun, and I'm really glad that Steve managed to get that little short video. Again, it shows the corkscrew, which is a super famous set of turns. You can't quite see, but you go up a pretty long straightaway for these tracks. You know, what is it, a tenth of a mile, maybe, if not, probably less than that. Then there's a right angle left-hand turn, and then you drop off. You can't see what's there. You just drop into this. It's like skiing, and that's what makes it fun. And by the way, when I met my wife, Teresa, the guy that introduced us said, "Hey, Randy, you still race?" And I said, "Yeah, not as often as I used to. We have a couple of events a year locally, not the 10 or 12 we used to do." And this beautiful girl says, "Oh man, did you ever race Laguna Seca?" And I said, "Yeah, one of my favorite tracks." She said, "Yeah, how about that corkscrew? Isn't that the most fun?" I said, wait a minute, you know the corkscrew? And she said, well, yeah, I took the British race driving school there and ran Formula 4. I said, okay, sold, baby, sold. Any rate, it's a famous, because it's so unlikely to have a section like that. Okay, one of the questions was that a Cosworth DFV, stands for double four valve? And the answer is yes, that's what that is. And I wasn't quite correct when I mean, a little bit misleading. Yes, Ford did buy Cosworth, and it funded the development of that engine, the DFV, which was basically a 3-liter version similar to what they had learned on the 2-liter versions, such as is in those Chevrons. And that is 4 valves, a flat valve angle. You know, everybody's thinking, oh, a hemispherical shape. No, no, no. No. Cosworth was into barely 15 degrees. Was at any rate, I could go on and on and on about that technical shit because it's really interesting to me, but if it's not interesting to you, I don't want to dwell on it too much. Some of the other questions that were asked, and I appreciate the comments and the questions, was that Niki Lauda actually drove that blue Chevron Roadster, the B19? And the answer is yes, he did. He was from Salzburg, Austria, and there is a racetrack there called the Salzburg Ring, and he was invited as a celebrity to race there. And of course, the promoter would figure, well, that's going to increase the attendance, and maybe we'll make some money on this event. So he didn't have a car. So Red Rose Racing, which was a well-known outfit in England, and they toured the continent too, run by a guy named John Bridges. You see his name is on that car too. And John said, hey, Niki, why not take my car, which is now my car, why not take my car and we'll split the appearance money that you got, okay? Because again, this is kind of what racing is especially back in those days. It wasn't like Formula One that you see today that is so spun out that, I mean, it's incredible. But in my old man way of thinking, the humanity is kind of lost. Everything is like so cybered out and so fucking analyzed to the nth degree. And yes, it's unbelievably fast. And I think the difference between the fastest guy on the pole and the last guy to qualify is like a second and a half. And as you may know, there's very little passing because the cars are all so even. And then there's also the thing about dirty air. The cars all are built with so much downforce and wings and undercarriage and all of that stuff. Yeah, that's great and clean air, but what happens when you're trying to come up on a guy and the air is all dirty? Your car doesn't work like it's supposed to. So again, some of the humanity, and you know, I go back to jazz jamming, and it's pretty hard to jam when you got 200 guys analyze, 200, what would you call it, instruments that are downloading data. So one guy is just looking at the right front shock absorber, right? That's all his job is on the computer. He's looking at that. And another guy's looking at, I'm looking at the left rear brake. And okay, great. I'm a seat of the pants guy. Okay, so I mentioned Chevron, and one reason why I liked Chevron was because they were empirical, like we were. And he had no formal engineering experience at all. So he did it up in northern England at dirt floor, cold as hell shop. And he would build the car, go out and race it, and change stuff. Oh, that made it better. Well, I'll do more of that. Oh, that made it even better. Let me try a little more. No, that made it worse. Let me back up a little bit. And I got to tell you, there's a whole lot to that empiricism, which is the way we develop Mesa Boogie amplifiers. Even so far as the bias voltage, there is a sweet spot, and there really is, and that's why we don't make it adjustable, because we get the sweet spot where it's reliable and it sounds the best. And sometimes it's higher than we think, and we would think, you know, the theory is the more class A, that is, the lower the negative bias, the better it's going to be. Well, that ain't really true. To our way of thinking. So Again, it's a virtue of empiricism. Okay, what else about that chevron? I mentioned the Black Beauty won the first time out for endurance racing. Well, the blue car, the B19, which evolved from the B16 by becoming lighter weight, that won the world championship the first time out for sprint racing. So, and again, somewhat like Cosworth, these two guys, Mike Costin and Keith Duckworth. See how the name Cosworth came about? They combined their two names. These guys just empirically came up with how to build an engine that put out this ungodly amount of horsepower for a small, limited displacement. Now, why does European cars always have small displacement? Because of their stupid tax laws. They tax cars not on the cost like we do in America. The more it costs, the more you pay. They tax it on the displacement. So that's why you got all these little weeny engines over there, at least compared to America. And you get a British car over here, British sports car, you drive it from New York to San Francisco, that engine has had it. They cannot do a sustained 70, 75, 80 miles an hour for 3,000 or 4,000 miles. They just are worn out at that. But, you know, putting around where the top speed is maybe 60, then they're great. Most of the time it's like 40, 35 to 50. Okay, so I think that's kind of ridiculous, but that's part of why there's all these displacement limitations. Now, Can-Am Racing, one of the greatest race series of all time, was unlimited engines. And that's when we went to 600 to 800 to 900 to 1,000 to 1,100, and then the great Porsches with the twin turbos, they could turn those up to 1,400 horsepower, which is ridiculous, but it does help. And what does it help? It helps you push the air out of the way. Now, that becomes the limiting principle in these race cars. And that's where the extra horsepower really pays a dividend. But you have to have a track where you get up to those speeds where air resistance becomes the major issue. Now, air resistance increases as exponentially as the square of the speed. So you increase the speed, say 50%, and the air resistance doubles. And it doubles again and again and again until the point is that's what you're pushing up against. Just FYI, what we discovered with the 300 horsepower in the Chevron was that we were spinning the tire inside the rim under power, the rears, and the fronts under braking. And I noticed this, again, empirically. I said, hey, Thomas, I'm picking up tire vibration. No, I zeroed those out. Yeah, well, I tell you, they started out zero, and every event, it's worse. You know, we'll do several events on a race weekend. Let's mark where the valve stem is. And sure enough, after a 20-minute run, it's moved like 3 or 4 inches of the tire just moving in the rim. So we ended up more or less gluing. Instead of using lube, which is what the tire shop guys do, you know, soapy water, we would spray them with brake clean so that they're basically glued to the rim. That solved that problem. But that'll show you that getting the power to the ground, even with 300 horsepower, never mind 600, 800 or so, it's an issue. And you can't really use that power until you're going, you know, north of 130, 40, 50, and then it really starts to pay off where, you know, the Chevron with 300 horsepower starts to hit a wall, that increasing wind resistance. Okay, what else about that Chevron? I had great runs with that. Monterey Historics, 2 firsts, a second, and the Rolex Trophy. And one of the first was against a 5-liter Ferrari Le Mans. And again, there it is, 2.5 times the engine displacement in a Ferrari. And the 2-liter, not 5-liter like the Ferrari, 2 liters of the Chevron cleaned the guy's clock. It beat him. He wasn't too happy about that. But that's the way it came out. That's also where I had the good fortune of meeting Bobby Rahal and actually beating him not once but twice. And these races were shown on Speed Vision. I don't know if they're still available. I don't even think Speed Vision is still available. But here's a Team Stoopid for you. I'm working on the septic line up at my house, right? It's what everybody wants to do on their weekend. And I get a phone call from Canada, and it's my pal Bob White, who, whenever he's available, which was surprisingly a lot of the times, was one of the third guy of Team Stoopid. Great guy. And he's yelling, "Hey, Randy, you're on TV." And so I parked the shovel and went running up and turned on the TV. Sure enough, there's the Monterey Historics on Speed Vision, and there we were. And we won it, and it was right there. So that was kind of a lot of fun. What else? Won the West Coast Championship with that car twice. And the big deal was you get your free haulage to Daytona. That was great. We had a sour engine and came fourth, but hey, that was okay. It was a learning experience. And again, we were just having a lot of fun. Now, somebody else asked about those cars. Now, those sports racers, 2-liter sports racer can be thought of as a thinly disguised Formula 2 car. Formula 2 car is pretty much like a Formula 1 car, except it has a 2-liter engine instead of a 3-liter engine. And why would I want that? Well, because it's safer. And the threat of open wheel racing is that if you contact your front wheel against the guy in front of you's rear wheel, you get airborne. And I've seen that happen twice, where I could see the undercarriage of the guy in the air. It was that far up in the air. Like a good 4 feet, 4.5 feet or so, the car just gets launched. And no thanks. Like I said, I've been heard about it, and then I saw it, not once, but twice. And when you can count the rivets on the belly pan, you're glad that that's not you. Okay, what else here that somebody wanted to know? That's pretty much it. I think I mentioned Eddie Lawson, the guy who came second on that Formula One deal there. Yeah, I think I already mentioned him. What else happened? Well, that BT29, that was the open wheel, the Formula B car. That was the one that was the most rewarding, the most fun to drive. Not trying to kill you all the time, very reliable, very inexpensive, relatively speaking, and no more fun could be had. I wish you guys could experience what that's like. And without even knowing what we were doing, or knowing what the event was, we won second place at the national championship. Only after that, we found out that was the national championship down in Austin, Texas, at that great circuit of the Americas. So if you're with me this far, thanks for hanging out, and we'll get back to amplifiers and other fun topics. And I may post, I think that'd be a good idea to post that car video again as a separate one so that it shows up a little better. Okay, thanks everybody. Appreciate your watching. Take care. Bye-bye.